Hey guys, we're Belenja95, recording live from your County prison cell. I've been regretting doing this ever since I came up with it, but I can't not do it. It's the just to do it to say that I did it is worth more than the embarrassment of me not knowing what the hell I'm talking about throughout this video. So for the longest time I wanted to, for some reason, wanted to put a Bionicle character in a death battle, and I remember when Bionicle was big, but I'm not a fan. I don't really understand any of it. Um, and I was like, who would I do this? Who would I do this with? And then I thought ah shit, the most modern version of the most modern equivalent to Bionicle would be Ninjago. So I was wondering how would I put what character would I use? And then I ended up looking through all these characters and finding this fight. This is this is Teridax from Bionicle versus Overlord from Ninjago. Um, so there's a lot in this fight that I'm gonna get wrong or I'm gonna just blatantly miss. So bear with me. But let's start with Teridax. So Teridax is from a species who he specifically evolved throughout time from being bionic to being literally just energy inside of living energy inside of pretty much a suit of armor. Um, so he has no. I mean, unless you consider the armor his physical body, he has no physical body. Um, and like many of the Bionicle, he controls, an element or has influence over an element. He specifically has influence over shadow, right? So he can control darkness, manipulate shadows, and things like that. Um, but then he kind of became. Then he has a million other powers as well. Um, so a lot of them kind of run together. So he has weather manipulation. He has limited gravity manipulation, and his most proficient, he's also able to manipulate uh, emotions or people's mental state. He's able to cause confusion and just cause somebody to just be not madness, but able to cause severe confusion. And he's also able to control people, manipulate people's emotions, drive people into a blind rage, drive into a crippling sadness, things like that, as well as immunity to pretty much all of the, or resistance, I should say, to pretty much all of the elements. Um, resistance to energy, the ability to fire energy and shapeshift energy, because he basically is energy. And aside from that, he also has an energy form where he maintains all of the mental powers he had. So again, he maintains the emotional and psychological manipulation, but he doesn't maintain any of his physical powers. However, if he is in that form for too long without finding another host or suit of armor, he will dissipate and just basically die. And then another ability he had, which I think this one might only be, I think this one is amplified when he's in his energy form. It's not, he has it, but it's amplified in his energy form, where he can essentially absorb people's minds or souls or whatever you want to refer to it as. But the downside to that is that he has to fight, he has to if he absorbs somebody with a strong will, they have to they kind of linger around before they just vanish into into him, right? So he has to fight. He has to kind of like fight for control against them mentally, until they eventually just are incorporated into him fully. He actually has lost fights because he had several people who he had recently absorbed fighting him mentally while he was fighting physically. And then we take into consideration something known as the Great Spirit. That sounds like an omnipotent being or something, or some sort of god above all, but really it's just a giant robot that is 40 million, I'm not exaggerating, 40 million feet tall. So, it actually has an entire world inside of it. Right? Like it's considered a god because to the civilizations that inhabit it, it literally is the entire universe. So that's kind of why it's considered like a god, but it isn't. It's just a robot. It's a giant robot. Um so and he has piloted that robot before. And had control over it. He's now, I mean, the character's dead if anyone's curious, but he's one of the Bionicle that has piloted the Great Spirit. So that, as far as the world in internally, as far as the world internally inside that robot, he has complete control over that world. Right? He is essentially a god to those civilizations. Um, the universe outside of it, he's just piloting a giant robot that has, like lasers and stuff like that. So I'm sure I'm underplaying something, or I'm sure I'm, like really missing a lot of information, but there is a lot of information. Bionicle lore is really deep. Anyway, let's go into Ninjago. So the Overlord, it just sounds like it just sounds like a, generic villain. You'd think that what is it, Gargamax or whatever, is the main villain. But no, this guy is essentially his boss. He is the Hordak to his Skeletor, right? So the Overlord is pretty much the essence of darkness in the Ninjago universe. He is to maintain the balance between light and dark, he is necessary to exist because he is the essence of darkness itself. And the first Spinjitzu master, being the essence of light, was able to essentially seal him away and separate the world into two different islands. One being, where the foundation of Spinjitzu created society, and the other one being, just like a waste, not a wasteland, but like a wilderness where, the Overlord would rest. So, hundreds of thousands of years later, this guy comes to fruition, takes over Gargamax. I might be getting that name wrong. I don't know. And ends up being this, ends up becoming this giant superpower. So he also, being the, literal embodiment of darkness, has control over shadow and things like that. And he is able to also, he's able to enslave people's bodies and use them as like a host for himself. And he's also able to, and he leads what's known as the Stone Army, which is just a literal army of infinite stone soldiers that just keep rebuilding more of themselves. So he has that at his disposal. Now, and then later down the line, the Masters of Spinjitzu, I don't know if they're referred to as the Masters of Spinjitzu, but the show is, the guys who do the Spinjitzu, they have what's referred to as the golden weapons. Now, the Overlord eventually was able to melt down these golden weapons, because it said whoever would master the 4 golden weapons would become the Golden Warrior, and would be able to just, like, obliterate whatever they need, would be like this perfect fighter. The Overlord find a loophole in that by melting down the golden weapons and creating a giant mech suit out of them that he was able to possess, right? Because again, he didn't have a physical body when he got beaten as Gargamax. So he, in essence, didn't, master those 4 weapons and embody them. So he was able to, word I'm looking for. He was able to, in essence, complete the prophecy there and become the Golden Warrior. Now, the Golden Warrior is, this mech that incorporates not only the full, complete power of those 4 weapons, but also is, a giant robot, so it has the standard, laser beams, rockets, things like that, and was able to, also use the destructive power of those 4 weapons as its own power. So it had all of those different abilities, which incorporate the elements, right? So, they incorporate fire, water, air, earth, that sort of thing. And, let's go into the analysis now, because I'm actually a little tired of doing this. So, I feel like this fight, seemed really one-sided when I was doing research, but then I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I can see where the similarities lie. Like, okay, they both manipulate shadow. That's true. They both have the ability to basically enslave a person's mind or body. Teridax by literally absorbing their mind, whereas Overlord does it by, just possessing their body. The difference being that the Overlord, they both have shown that they're susceptible to resistance. Like, they both struggle to maintain complete control. I think the thing that pushes that aspect of it into Teridax's favor is the fact that he also is capable of, mentally and psychologically manipulating his foes, or with his abilities, not just with, like, by analyzing them or something. I mean, like, he could literally force them to feel confusion or feel a certain emotion, and that could influence, that could influence Overlord's mind and cause, the person, cause him to lose his grip over the person he's possessing. And then I thought, well, okay, and they both, when they're destroyed, end up, living as kind of these spectral beings. Teridax living as just pure energy, Overlord living as just kind of, he turns into like an orb, and he just kind of waits. He never really dies. It's kind of like Starscream, where it's like his spark is immortal. He never really dies. He just goes from one thing to another. Teridax will die eventually, but then they also both have giant robots. Now, looking at it through the lens of power, it's possible that maybe Overlord has, this giant powerful robot, but the scale to this is ridiculously not even. Like, the Golden Warrior mech, or the Golden Master mech, or whatever it's referred to, right? You cannot convince me that the world of Ninjago is large enough that mech is anywhere near 40 million feet tall, right? Which the Great Spirit mech is. So, as soon as, like, that's where it would become. It would be like, Overlord's like, well, haha, I've possessed this mech, time to give up, and then Teridax is like, wait here a sec, over the horizon, just, you see it just engulfing the planet. Yeah, like, that's where this is gonna end. So, not only does Teridax hold a few advantages to their suspiciously similar power sets, but, once it comes to the final form versus the final form, that's who wins here. I mean, the only advantage that I would say that Overlord has is that he can't truly be killed, whereas Teridax, if his energy form is outside of his is outside of a physical host for long enough, it just kind of dissipates and dies. Um, that's the only real advantage I would say Overlord has, but I'd say Teridax kind of wins this. It's not a matter of being taken seriously or the show being meant to be serious, or anything. It is really just a matter of like, looking like you do have to take things that aren't meant to be taken seriously sometimes to do this, but um, somebody's gonna say the Bionicle character wins because Bionicle is more serious than Ninjago. Like that's a stupid argument in my opinion. But yeah, anyway, I do, be that as it may, I do give the fight to Teridax in this case. So yeah, I mean the Stone Army is the only situation that I could see. I could see Overlord having like the advantage, but whether or not they'd even incorporate that as it, I mean, he has control over it. It's not really outside help, but he does kind of. It is. They're like stormtroopers, like they are outside help. Like yes, he controls them, but you can't have an entire army at your disposal and say like, oh, it's not outside assistance because I can tell them to come here. Like that doesn't know. Um, yeah. So I would say Pterodax semi comfortably takes this. But yeah, finally glad I got that out of the way. I hope I never have to do something along these lines again for Blungen 95.